Residents of Jasper, Alberta can soon begin the next chapter of their lives. Officials now say they can finally return home as of this Friday. This comes 3 weeks after a devastating wildfire burned down nearly a third of the community. Last hour, the town's mayor, along with provincial and federal officials, spoke about the re-entry plan and the adjustment that residents will need to make.
We know as humans that we all find comfort in familiar things. Our residents will be looking for familiar faces in familiar places. Some of that familiarity is gone. There will be an adjustment. Our residents will re-enter to what they will have to make as a new normal. They will need time and space to do that.
The CBC's Tricia Kindleman has been tracking the latest on this story from Jasper. Tricia, we heard from the mayor there, Richard Ireland, the mayor of Jasper. He said the focus would be on residents. What more did he have to say?
Yeah, so he's really asking him and all the other officials, really asking visitors to give those residents some time and some space before they start to plan their trips back to that area. It's clearly an economy that relies heavily on tourism, heavily on their tourist dollars. But right now, they have chosen to go with what they've referred to as a one-stage re-entry plan. Now, to do that, they have basically said, we're going to open the gates on Friday and you can return. But that also means they're not checking IDs, they're not checking addresses because it's complicated. And a lot of the residents there have PO boxes on their addresses. Some of them are not permanently there. They live there seasonally as, again, a part of that tourism industry. So they have opted to just sort of allow for a return without a lot of limitations. But they are asking people to respect the space and respect the residents and those sort of boundaries. But they also are assuring everyone that it won't be long before they want to get people back into the town of Jasper. It's beauty, it's glorious, and they know people want to explore it, but the residents need to adapt to a new normal first, as you mentioned, Abby. So here's a bit more from Minister Rick McIver today around that ask for visitors to just give them some space.
To be clear, Jasper wants visitors to come when there is a place for those visitors to be entertained and spend their money. That isn't yet. And the town of Jasper will be very good at letting you know when that day comes. Jasperites need the time right now in the space to settle back into their homes. Jasper will be open for business soon, not Friday.
So that means a lot of those residents are going to get access to the community, but a lot of them won't be able to actually stay in the community. There is still limited services around. Gas and water has been restored to the east end of town, but the west end, where it was hardest hit, where we saw some of those most devastating photos come out of, water and gas service as well as telecommunications, that sort of thing, could be a bit spotty depending on the status of some homes. And there's also some homes that are still standing around there, but still could be heavily damaged due to smoke and just the temperatures that were reached as that fire moved through that community. But they have assured them that emergency services will be operating, the ER department and the EMS services will be ready, but the whole health complex will not be ready. And they have said that they are also keeping continuing care residents out just for the time being. As well, one thing we also should note, Abby, really important, residents will still be returning under an evacuation alert. Now, officials were confident that they have control on that fire, saying that on the edge closest to town, things are nearly 70% controlled. But you never know. It is fire, it is nature. Things could still take an unexpected turn.
Tricia, also in the last hour, we heard from federal ministers talking about the 2024 plan for wildfires and hurricanes. What did they have to say?
Yeah, well, just extreme seasons expected on both fronts. We've already seen about 3 million hectares burned, rather 300 million hectares burned, and that is the average for an entire season, but we still have about 6 or 8 weeks potentially left to go. So you can see this map right now, which shows where those extreme areas are concentrated again in that Northwest Territory area and in some parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan and BC. So there is an expectation that the fire season will extend right into September. Here's a bit more on that.
It is not unusual for Western Canada to see high levels of fire activity this time of year. However, forecasting anticipates that activity will be above average in parts of the West to well above average in areas in BC and Alberta. In September, above normal wildfire activity is expected to continue from Western and Southern British Columbia through the Central Prairies and Western Manitoba.
Definitely a focus on that wildfire situation, but we can't dismiss the hurricane season. NOAA calling for up to 24 named storms, possibly 13 of those hurricanes. So still a lot of season left for us to still navigate throughout the summer and into the fall, Abby.
Thanks for this, Tricia. The CBC's Tricia Kindleman. Being forced to evacuate your home at a moment's notice can be one of the most stressful experiences of a person's life, and the effects can linger. A new study now from the Lancet Planetary Health Journal suggests that nearly 2 out of 3 adults might experience post-traumatic stress disorder for up to 6 months after escaping a wildfire. And about 1 in 4 people could also potentially experience a major depressive or anxiety disorder. For more on this, we're now joined by Dana Rose Garfin. She is the co-author of this study, as well as an associate professor in the Department of Community Health Sciences at the University of California in Los Angeles. And she's joining us now from South Haven, Michigan today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now, what I really want to just drill on what the study says, that 2 out of 3 adults might experience PTSD for up to 6 months after escaping a wildfire. What really stood out to you most in your findings?
Yeah, so this study, we reviewed the literature on what others have found regarding the mental health effects of wildfires and other climate-related disasters. And yeah, I mean, it was very surprising just to see how high those rates can be. There are a lot of different factors that can predict that. But, we kind of think a lot about hurricanes and other types of threats. But, wildfires, I think sometimes the mental health effects and how serious they can be and how long lasting can sometimes be overlooked in the discussion.
We just a short while ago spoke to an evacuee from the town of Jasper here in Canada, and she said, having to pack up your things in mere minutes was something that was very difficult for her to do. You spoke with several evacuees throughout this research. What did they tell you that they were struggling with in particular?
Well, something that we often find when we talk to folks who have survived wildfires is that they don't always know exactly where the threat is and what they should do. So a lot of times there can be a lack of information regarding what the threat is, how urgent it is. And that's why you have these instances where folks right away just have to grab all their stuff they can and hit the road. And a lot of that is just because of the nature of a wildfire. The winds can change, the weather can change, and the direction of the threat can change. So it's just such a moving target that a lot of times there's not a lot of advance warning. And folks really end up in a situation where they just have to kind of grab and go at a last minute's notice. And by the time the threat is upon them, it's really this state of emergency and crisis.
Dana, oftentimes in these situations, mental health is not the top priority, right? They're trying to figure out how to get that roof back up over their heads, over their children's heads, how to get food for their children, how to earn money and get back to their regular life. So potentially mental health could be put on the back burner. So can you talk to us a little bit about the ramifications if these illnesses go untreated or undiagnosed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really, we think about reciprocal effects because a lot of those stressors that you mentioned are things that increase the risk of post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety in the wake of these threats. And that can actually prolong the symptoms, right? So you experience this event, you come back, you have a problem with rebuilding your home, you have lost all of your belongings, you need to get the kids back to school, there's damage to your community. Those stressors are things that actually make post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety worse. And yet at the same time, when you are dealing with these negative mental health effects of these events, it can make getting things back on track more difficult. So of course we want in the immediate aftermath, folks need to get back to stable housing. Kids need to get back to school. We need to get food on the table. But concurrently, we need to find ways to help folks deal with the psychological implications of these events so that they are able to have sustained recovery with those tangible factors as well. So they really go hand in hand rather than being in two distinct buckets.
How much of the struggle has to do with the financial difficulties that people face when they've been evacuated from their homes or from their towns because of a wildfire?
I mean, that is always something that we see and that we hear being a really important factor. You know, anytime there's a financial stressor, it's just going to make everything worse. So I think that that's one thing that, disaster relief organizations can do to try to address both these immediate physical needs as well as the mental health consequences, is to get people those tangible resources they need. However, the threat of losing your life and actually having all of your personal belongings damaged or destroyed in something like a wildfire, all the money in the world obviously can't bring back a person that's lost or cherished personal objects, memories, photographs, all your clothing. So, even if you are fortunate enough to be in a financial situation where you're able to replace those things, those mental health effects can really still linger. Although, of course, the fewer resources you have, the more pronounced those mental health effects might be.
Adina, we just have a little bit of time left. Before I let you go, I do want to ask about what more you think the governments should be doing in terms of providing that mental health care support to these evacuees.
Just getting resources into the community and allowing people to know where they can go for help, because there can often be a disconnect. The government might actually even sometimes have resources, but people don't know how to access them. They don't know how to pay for them. They don't know what is covered by their insurance, what they might need to find extra resources for, or even who to call or where to go to. So, just providing, not only the availability of services is really important, but also providing the information of where and how folks can go to access those resources when they are provided. I mean, we've done post-disaster studies all over the world. And one thing that we often find is, the governments will have these great intentions and provide all these services, and people have no idea they even exist. So providing the services, but yet also providing the information about how people can access those services, that's really critical in the aftermath of these events.
Associate Professor in the Department of Community Health Sciences at UCLA, Dana Rose Garfin, thank you very much.
All right, thanks for having me. Good luck to everyone.